This is World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris. My guest today is Nardwuar. Nardwuar, welcome to the World Cafe.
Hello, Rita. How the heck are ya?
I am doing so well. I am so happy that you are here right now. And just before we turned on the mics, we were talking about how you DM'd me on Twitter to talk to me to set up this interview. And when I got that tweet, that DM, I was so excited. Not only because I'm a huge fan of yours. I'm Canadian. I have been watching you forever. But I also couldn't believe that you handle all of your own PR and your own bookings, and that I was totally surprised by. Why do you like to keep that operation, small and have control over that?
I am a one-person DIY operation. Editing, writing, producing, transportation, social media, booking airlines, etc. It's all me. And I've been trying, I think probably since like the 90s to move up so somebody would do it for me, but I haven't yet reached the status of the Nardwuar Inc. and people doing stuff for me. But I would love that to happen. I would love it to happen. However, it's just me right now.
I have to ask, are you in a log cabin right now?
We're in the Nard Nest, where I actually broadcasted on I think probably since December 2020. Don't do as much now, but yeah, this is the Nard Nest.
I love it. And I should say, we are a nationally syndicated program in the States. So for the Americans, your full name here is Nardwuar the Human Serviette. And for the Americans who might not know, what is a serviette?
Well, Raina, in the USA, you have napkins.
Napkins.
And in Canada, we have serviettes. Nardwuar, the human serviette. Nardwuar, a dumb, stupid name, like Sinbad. Human, in honor of the Cramp song, Human Fly. Nardwuar, the human
serviette.
And when I became a radio DJ in 1987 at CITR Radio in Vancouver, Canada, where I still volunteer and do a show, I couldn't use my name, so I used the name Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, which I had out there already because I'd presented some gigs using the name Nardwuar Presents. So it was my friends, and then I took the name for myself.
And you've kept it all these years. I do want to go right back to the very beginning here. I know it was your mom who was your first inspiration to become an interviewer. How?
Well, she did a local cable access show called Our Pioneers and Neighbors. And she would interview the next door neighbor about what was happening, their life story, etc., not celebrities. And I would watch that show and be like, well, why are you talking to a celebrity? What's a next door neighbor got to say? And she was like, everybody has an amazing story. You just have to draw it out of them. I still didn't quite get it. And probably people at school didn't get it as well. Because when I'd come to school, people were like, hey, Nardwuar, my real name, we saw your mom on television. And I would go home. And then I would turn on the television and I would see my mom and I'd be like, oh God, my mom's on Channel 10. Because I'm going to get teased the next day at school because people saw my mom on television. And all these years later, I realized it was kind of cool having your mom on TV and interviewing people next door and extrapolating their stories. But I still had that idea in my head of oh God, my mom's on Channel 10. So the first record I put out, the first compilation record on Nardwuar the Human Serviette Records was called Oh God, My Mom's on Channel
10.
I named it in honor of my mom being on television. And then later I realized how cool it was what she did.
I am speaking to Nardwuar on World Cafe. Why did you want to release albums on your own label that early on?
Well, part of the way was to get the interview out there. Remember, there was no internet. And I wasn't on like MTV or Much Music in Canada. So there was no way of distributing your interviews. So people would be like, well, you'd film an interview. What would happen? Well, I'd take the audio for CITR. I'd take the video and mail it out on VHS tapes to different people. I transcribe the interview for like fanzines for like Razor Cake, Rocktober, or Flipside. And there was kind of like nowhere else to put the kind of like
Right.
stuff you're doing. But there was one place I thought, I could burn my interviews to record. So I transferred my interviews to record and then mailed out my records to different radio stations, and they played some music and they played some interviews. It was the only way to get heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, no internet. You got to get it out there somehow. What was it that made you want to interview specifically musicians?
Well, when I got the CITR radio, I thought it would be a DJ and I'll just play music. I just play like the Young Canadians. I play like the Enigmas. I play the Subhumans, like the Pointed Sticks, or I play the local legendary band Slow. So I did play them for my first show, but at the end of my first show, the records were completely scattered everywhere. And I was like, this is too much work. So for the next show or the show after, I was like, I played a song, turn on the mic, interviewed somebody, turn off the mic, and played one more song. So it was a lot easier. So that's why I got into music interviews. But I was still into music, but that's how the interview happened. A lot of people are great at DJing, but I was terrible. And I am terrible. In fact, if you tuned in this last week, the CITR radio, you would still hear me making mistakes.
And how did you originally get that show at CITR?
Well, when I joined CITR the first year, I was just happy to like listen to music, eat my lunch in the lounge. And I somehow, after a year, convinced the program director to maybe, could you give Nardwuar like a 60-second show? Because it was like, yes, a 60-second show. Because I know it was like hard to get. Anybody can get a show on CITR. You have to present like a demo tape, etc. But I realized they probably wouldn't like my demo tape. It usually takes a couple. So I said, 60 seconds. How can you go wrong? But they said, okay, we'll give you a 15-minute show. So that's how I got the show. But it was the second year before I jumped into the show because I was just happy to hang out and work on public service announcements and just listen to music at CITR and meet all the people that are at CITR, like Randy from Mint Records in Vancouver, Canada, who has put out many compilations of great stuff. He was at CITR at that time.
And your Doot Doola Doot Doo started on your radio show, right?
Exactly. Thank you, Raina. Thank you for remembering that little tidbit there. Yes, people would phone in to my radio show to ask questions of like a guest of somebody else interviewing, and they would ask the question at the end. You know, when you listen to regular call radio, talk radio or whatever, a lot of times they just dump the caller.
It feels harsh.
Yeah, it was harsh. Like, they don't get to say bye. So I thought, here's a nice way to end the conversation. They ask a question and I go, doot doo loot doo.
Doot doot.
Exactly. And I got that from the hockey games because I played the hockey games, played a baseball game. So everything I've done has been done before.
Well, I don't know if I would say that. I feel like maybe, if that's true, you've combined it in an entirely new and novel way.
Well, I'm just here to inspire people. Like if Nardwuar can do it, anybody can do it.
You also have your own band. You formed the Evaporators in 1986. And I'm going to play a song from the Evaporators, and then we're going to come back and talk some more. This is one from your 2009 split EP with Andrew WK called A Wild Pair, which I have a copy of. The song is called The Bombs in My Pants. Can you tell us anything about it before we hear it?
I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Boom. Look
heard a bit of The Bombs in My Pants from Nardwuar on World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris, and Nardwuar is my guest today. And speaking of pants, there's a segue for you. In the 90s, you did a bunch of political, kind of ambush questions, you could say, of a bunch of people. There was Mikhail Gorbachev, where you asked him about what world leader has the biggest pants, or what person he talked to has the biggest pants. Why were you interested in going in and talking to politicians?
Well, again, I'll interview anybody. And also in that clip, I said, Derzhne Rokin u Slobodny Svet, which apparently is not, but I thought was a translation in Russian for keep on rocking in a free world. So that kind of was combined with the pants question. And for me, I interview anybody. And also at CITR Radio, not only you could be a DJ, you could be involved in a news department, saying, hey, we got some press passes down the science world. You could talk to Mikhail Gorbachev. So I went to the press conference and we're able to play it, which is amazing. All these years later, I think it's like 31 years or 32 years later on the World Cafe.
I'm so glad that you brought up like the fact that how you got into the room, because there's also the one where you're talking to U.S. President Gerald Ford in I think 87, calling Canada a country full of clam chowder and salmon, which I thought was a very funny thing to say. Actually, he was like, why would you say that about your own country?
It's just the first thing that popped into my head. And as for that press conference, you needed no accreditation at all.
You're in the front row.
I just walked in a room. It was totally empty. It was 1987. It was the Hotel Vancouver. We know we'd be there, but you didn't need any special. And the door was open. It was amazing. No, it was easy to get into press conferences like right then and there.
Yeah, political press could be a lot more serious than music or entertainment media. How did other people in media react to this kid asking these sort of ridiculous questions?
Well, at the Clinton Yeltsin summit, other members of the media recognized me and they said, get that guy out of here. He's going to embarrass us. He asked Mikhail Gorbachev, of all the leaders he's encountered, who has the biggest pants. He's going to do that again at Clinton and Yeltsin. So I was kicked out of the Clinton and Yeltsin summit. At that time, there was total security clearance, was required. They were cool with me being there, but those other members of the media were embarrassed by me.
Some people might get nervous in a situation like that where you're at a press conference in front of a world leader and you're going to ask something like silly. And I mean, if you're not asking something silly, you might get nervous, but you seem to have a kind of fearlessness around that sort of thing. Where does that come from?
Well, I'm scared all the time. I'm scared right now speaking to you, Raina
Douris.
On the World Cafe. Like, I'm always scared. No, it's true. You loosen up. So it's kind of like nothing scares me because I'm always scared.
It's just the baseline.
Exactly. No, it's true. You warm up. You warm up eventually. But it's kind of like just go out there and do it. And also, I live in fear of people being on the radio for so many years, people phoning in and saying, this interview is boring. So even though I'm not doing the interview live, I'm scared about somebody phoning in and saying, this is boring. So wherever I am doing an interview, I'm like, someone's going to think it's boring. Someone's going to think it's boring. So I don't have time to worry about being nervous. I just want to plow ahead with the interviews. In fact, I was doing an interview once at Lollapalooza in 1995 with Courtney Love. And by mistake, she had like a cigarette at her thigh and it was burning into my hand. I didn't even notice until afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, I got a total germs burn. I got like a burn because I was so scared talking to her, just holding the mic. I didn't even notice that. So yeah, I guess my advice to people being nervous is, I guess be aware of your surroundings a bit more than me. Don't be totally nervous, because if you're totally nervous, it's bad.
Now, was that interview with Courtney Love, was that before she helped you get an interview with Kurt Cobain? She got you backstage, right, to talk to him?
Yes, that was immediately afterwards. She got me backstage saying, hey, let him backstage. Other people were like, that's Nardwuar. You can't go backstage. She's like, that's my cousin Nardwuar. And next thing you know, I was backstage and there was Bobcat Goldthwait and the rest of Nirvana.
Um, didn't Courtney Love have some feedback for edits for that interview?
That's what I love. Thank you, Raina. The radio, the real guts, the understanding. It's like, yeah, when you're on CHR radio, and I was saying, like, I'm not the best DJ after all these years. I still make mistakes. I love the fact that Courtney complained my editing wasn't good enough. She was like, this is not edited properly. Edit me properly. I was like, oh, like, of all the things to bring up, it's like, I'm not edited properly. So that's wild. I love that. I love that she was in like the actual technical nuts and bolts angle.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly reintroduce you here. I am talking to the great interviewer Nardwuar today on World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris. You interviewed James Brown in 1999 for Much Music, which I understand was kind of a tough one to get into. You were backstage at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver, and Tiny the bouncer wouldn't let you in. What did you do?
Well, as I'd mentioned, I was a freelancer for Much Music, and Chris Nelson was doing Much West, the version of Much Music from the West Coast. And he said, hey, I got a James Brown interview coming up. Unfortunately, I had a brain hemorrhage, a minor stroke in July of 1999. And I kind of thought, well, I've done enough. Remember, I'd done my show for like 12 years. I was like, maybe that's it. I don't really feel like doing any more interviews. Like, I'm just going to take it easy from now on. And Chris was like, come on. It's time for you to get back in the saddle. We got James Brown. I was like, he's like, we got James Brown. I was like, okay, I'll do it. So the first interview back from my brain hemorrhage, Chris arranged with James Brown. I couldn't believe it. And we arrived at the interview with my friend Ed from CITR Radio, and Ed had a whole bunch of memorabilia with him. And as soon as we arrived at the interview, they said no interview with James Brown. I was like, but I was like, okay, well, can we do a phoner? At least can we do a phoner? He's like, yeah, maybe we can do a phoner, but we have all the stuff to sign. It's like, well, we'll get Mr. Brown to sign all the stuff, and then we'll arrange a phoner later. So we gave Mr. Brown all the stuff to sign. Afterwards, Snowman, who did security on James Brown's Off the Wall tour, came back and said, Mr. Brown will see you. He was impressed by the material. So my friend Ed had brought all the stuff for James to sign. So we did the interview with James Brown. I couldn't believe it. And then during the course of the interview, James played a song, Try Me, with the Bittersweets, and I was holding a mic for James Brown. I was holding the mic to James Brown's face. I was like James Brown's mic holder, and he was looking right in my eyes as he was singing a song. I couldn't believe this. And this was within 2 or 3 minutes of my first interview back since the brain hemorrhage. It was absolutely incredible. So thank you, Ed, for bringing all the memorabilia, and as well, thank you, Chris Nelson, and thank you, James Brown, rest in peace, for making this happen. I couldn't believe it. And people can check it out on YouTube as well.
You just brought this up. In your interviews, you often have memorabilia or you'll give gifts, things like, rare memorabilia or records they love, things that remind them of their childhood or their early career or influences of theirs. And, I don't know. I don't want to make you give up any secrets, but the thing everybody always wants to know is, where do you find this stuff?
Well, I kind of gave it away right then and there. I brought my friend Ed along. He had a huge James Brown collection. So as soon as Chris said to me, oh, you're going to talk to James Brown, I thought, I got to phone Ed. And Ed came along and brought his stuff. So I kind of connect the dots. It all comes basically back to CITR Radio. It's like, if I'm going to interview a metal band, maybe I should ask the metal show about the metal band. If I'm going to interview a folk band, maybe I should talk to the folk show about what questions I should ask. So just being around music and understanding, I think it's good because I'm nervous. I'm driven to find out information. Like the first time, an opportunity to speak to Snoop Doggy Dogg, I didn't want to do it, just like James Brown. And then I was driven. I was like, what the hell's going to happen? I can't ask Ed what. But I remembered my friend Diane had a red fox doll, the famous 1960s comedian. And I thought, I bet it'll break the ice and Snoop will like it. And he did, and a bromance continues to today. But I would have not brought along that red fox doll had I not been nervous. So and I was nervous. thinking of questions. So it's basically thinking of questions like, oh, I'm going to talk to James Brown. I'll ask my friend Ed, or I'm going to talk to Sleep. I'll ask my friend Diane, or I'm going to talk to Warren G, and I'll talk to Beat Street Records in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and maybe borrow some of their collection.
How do you prep? Do you write it down? Are you like, do you have a file that you keep on people? Where does that start for you when you know you're going after an artist?
There are many files on my computer that have not been realized. Like the Paul McCartney file is like completely full, but I've had no luck doing it. But I think it's kind of like, I used to like do my radio show like once a week. So it's kind of like a week I think about that for preparation. That's sort of what I do like for a week. But the research never stops. You're always on the lookout for something or some questions, etc. And you're always thinking, like, what can you do more? Like, what? There's got to be, who, what, when, where, how. But there's got, if you can complete that, that's good. But there's other stuff too.
What? Being interviewed or doing an interview, it's like a two-way street, right? There's you, the interviewer, and then there's the interview subject. What makes a great interview subject?
Well, I like people that like you just put the mic to them and they talk. Like Questlove of the band The Roots is like such a great hip hop historian. I'll ask him something and they'll talk away. The same thing with like Jello Biafra or like Tyler the Creator or Pharrell. Pharrell's interesting because the first time I talked to him, he had been interviewed many times before. So we should never go into an interview expecting the person to be a certain way. I was expecting him to be kind of like, I've been interviewed many times, nothing would faze him. But I showed him a Rump Shaker, one of his early compositions, and he was like totally blown away. And after the interview, he enjoyed it so much he set me up with Jay-Z. Like he arranged my Jay-Z interview. He said, what can I do for you? And I was like, Jay-Z is I'll set up an interview. And he did. And then a couple years later, he remembered me when he started his YouTube channel. Thank you, Pharrell. And he hired me. He hired me. He gave me money. So so that's the ultimate, isn't it? Jay-Z, money, and an interview.
That's a perfect interview subject right there. When they end up giving you money at the end.
Also, Drake set me up with an interview with Lil Wayne. Franz Ferdinand took my band to Evaporate. You heard the song. They took us on tour, play Roseland in New York City to like 3,000 people. And before we had played like the Acme Underground to like 9 people. So it was like, a 3,000% increase. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate people's kindness.
Do you have a guiding philosophy when you are setting out to do an interview? Are there things that you're always thinking about in the way you approach interviews?
Well, actually, you had mentioned this before, like, how do you know what to ask her? I put all my questions down on a piece of paper on note cards. You don't have to have note cards. You don't have to. But in the rare cases when the publicist is going, come on, wrap it up. Come on, wrap it up. You can like, and then you can ask the question as like, read it out or whatever. Because many times I've done interviews, I've come back and people are like, how did it go? It's like, well, they told me to cut out really early because they didn't have time. Like, did you ask someone? So, I forgot. This way you won't forget. So I just go through all my questions. When the questions are done, the interview is pretty much done.
Yeah.
I would love to have, 2 hours with the people like they do on many podcasts where they just sit and talk to their person and like you're on a ski lift, right? And then you can like, how you doing? Oh, where you going? Where you from? That's how I think about the interviews. The only problem is I have to do like the ski lift, kind of like the basic interview in like 10 minutes. I don't have 2 hours. It's like behind that door is like Lady Gaga. Go for it. And then I run through the door, talk to her, and then leave. I don't have time to sit around and just do the small talk.
I am speaking to Nardwuar on World Cafe.
And you are Raina
Douris.
Douris.
That's
and I'm
right.
I'm Nardwuar, the human serviette from Vancouver, British Columbia. Canada. Yes.
We talked a little bit about trying to get your work out there before there was the internet, putting out these compilation CDs. But on the flip side of things, how has doing the actual interviewing changed since you started? We have the internet now. You can get so much. There's tons and tons of information if you're willing to sit and sift through it all, how has that changed the way that you prep or the way that you interview people?
Yeah, you could go on and on and on. You'd never know when to stop. I guess I kind of, set rules for myself. Okay, a week's worth. Or, I would actually go to the library and use their DSL connection. I'd be like, I'll go on Tuesday and Wednesday, and that's all the time I have. And at the library, remember, they have like a certain amount of time you can be on the computer, like for
Yeah.
2 hours. You have to have a library card. So it's like, after 2 hours, I'm gone. So you kind of set these boundaries for yourself. But yeah, you have to know when to stop, because sometimes all the research in the world ain't going to save an interview. It's the interaction that really counts. So I love the fact that there's unlimited amount of information out there for you to grab.
Who is your white whale, like the person you desperately want to interview?
I kind of mentioned earlier, like Paul McCartney. I would love to talk to Paul McCartney, the rapper Playboy Cardi. Also, this kind of symbolizes people that I didn't get a chance to speak to, like Tina Turner, rest in peace.
Hmm.
I would have loved to have talked to her. Like all these legends, the legends are getting a bit older, so they may not be here for that longer. So I got to talk to them just because they're such legends. I'm so honored that I had a chance to speak to, Kurt Cobain or James Brown, etc. So those are sort of my white whales or people. I mean, there was Neil Young for a while. I tried many times. I met him twice, but I kind of gave up, and maybe I'll continue on, but I kind of gave up.
Uh, in Canada, growing up and just sort of being in the music world, I was always very aware of you, but I feel like your star rose in the States, especially when you started interviewing, hip hop artists. Why do you think that specifically resonated with so many people and kind of took you to a different level there?
Well, I think a lot of it coincided with the birth of like YouTube. So somebody would see me do an interview on YouTube, and it wasn't like a VHS tape I mailed them. When I wanted to interview like Rob Halford, I had to like mail a VHS tape to Rob Halford's management, and they approved it or whatever. But now I click of a link. So I guess the people seeing what I had done previously, you're like, well, sure, we'll do it. Where before it was kind of like only rumors. Like, oh, you're going to talk to so-and-so or so-and-so, be careful of him or whatever. Like, there was no way of the actual artist finding out what the person was like.
I'm talking to Nardwuar on World Cafe. We're getting close to the end of this interview here, and there's something that you do at the end of your interviews where you freeze, you point at the camera, and you just freeze. And it can feel like you are frozen like that for an eternity as the artist tries to figure out what to do next. Why did you decide to start doing that?
Well, remember I mentioned do-it-yourself one-person organization? I'm like an editor. I edit all my stuff. So it's easy to chop when people are completely still. And that's how it came about.
So it's just out of necessity.
Yeah, just like cut right then and there. And, if it went longer, that was fun. But basically, it's just like, so you can cut. Because, a lot of times when you end the interview, you go, do-do-lu-do.
Do.
Do, and it kind of goes fuzzy or whatever. It's like, I want it like, I want the hard cut. And this way, by, a freeze frame, that's how it happens. So again, yes, because of the dumb, stupid editing techniques that I use, cut and paste. I don't want people to think when I do editing, oh, I do the crazy editing. No, none of that. Like, for instance, like you played the bombs in my band's video song. There's a video of that, but I got my friend Joey to work on that. Like, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I, as an interviewer, am deeply inspired by what you do. So much so that I have had this page that I cut out of your cover story in Ion magazine in 2013. I've had it pinned up on the wall of my cubicle in every job I've had for the last 11 years. It is a picture of you pointing at the camera with a little pulled quote at the bottom that says, "People you interview become your friends." And I look at that quote every day and I love it, even though I still don't know if I fully understand it.
I'm not sure if I understand it as well, but I'm honored that you do that. And also on behalf of Canada, Raina, congratulations for NPR. I know it's been a few years, but still, it's amazing. A Canadian in the USA. I love that.
We're slowly infiltrating.
And like you probably are an inspiration for many people doing college radio, campus radio in Canada.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, that it means a lot. And yeah,
And also for doing radio continuing on. It's amazing you're still doing it because there's been so many cutbacks and people aren't doing it.
it's amazing. I mean, I just think I'm so glad that that more and more people are finding your interviews and that you are doing them. I'm just so
Well,
glad, and I'm so glad you didn't stop.
Well, thank you. I just love talking to people. I don't think I'll ever stop. Like I'll be like at an old folks home and interviewing, the person sitting next to me for dinner. Like I'll continue. I just love it. And people in college radio and music, etc. It's like it's not really like a job. It's like a lifestyle choice. It's all for fun. Like so. I love music. I'll continue to do it on and on and on because I just love extrapolating the stories. And also for me, the ultimate compliment for me these days, aside from bring the meme on a pole to a gig, is like I interview somebody, like I interviewed recently Fred again, electronic musician Fred again, and at the end of the interview he presented me with a gift, the Slime 1980 punk rock epic from Newfoundland, a Canadian punk rock holy grail.
Wow.
So he presented me with that gift.
Well, I hope that people listening to this are turned on to Nardwuar's interviews. And if you haven't watched them, they are available. It's nardwuar.ca. Is that right? Sorry.
Just type, just type Nardwuar,
Yeah.
Nardwuar into YouTube, and then it'll lead to a whole bunch of interviews. And if you want some
Yeah.
older stuff, check out nardwuar.com. It also has tour dates, etc. on there as well.
Okay, wonderful. To go out here, could you choose a song for us to hear at the end of this interview that we could play?
Well, I might play another Evaporator song, the song I Got a Disease, I'm Addicted to Cheese.
Cheese.
I got a disease, I'm addicted to cheese, from the Evaporators 2004 LP, Ripple Rock.
I'm so glad you have been on the show with me today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thanks so much, Raina,
Douris,
from NPR's
World Cafe.
Please keep on rocking in a free world and do.
Doot, doot.
Chunks of cherry.